His name was Randall O'Neill. He was 36 years old, and after 10 years of brutal work schedules in the scorching heat of Dubai, he had finally saved enough to come home for good. The taxi pulled up to the two-story colonial house on Maple Ridge Drive, the house he'd bought with his first engineering bonus 7 years ago. And Randall felt his chest tighten with anticipation. He'd wanted to surprise Annie. No phone call, no warning, just show up with his bags and that stupid grin he knew she loved. They'd video called every week for the first 5 years, but the calls had gotten sparse lately. She'd said she was busy with her teaching job. He'd believed her. The November afternoon was crisp and clear, the kind of California weather that made people move across the country. Randall paid the taxi driver, $45 from the airport, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just looking at his house. Their house. The lawn was immaculate, better maintained than when he'd left. New flower beds lined the walkway. The exterior had been repainted from beige to a soft gray with white trim. It looked expensive. It looked like someone who cared lived there. The front door was unlocked. That should have been his first warning sign. Randall pushed it open, dragging his suitcase across the threshold, ready to shout, "Honey, I'm home," like some character in a sitcom. But the words died in his throat. The living room he'd furnished before he left. The simple IKEA couch they'd assembled together on a Saturday afternoon. The basic coffee table he'd found at a garage sale. The bookshelf stuffed with Annie's teaching materials and his engineering textbooks was gone, completely gone. In its place stood expensive leather furniture that looked like it belonged in a showroom, a massive 70-inch flat-screen television mounted on the wall with a soundbar underneath, and abstract art in heavy frames that screamed money. The walls had been repainted. The carpet had been replaced with hardwood floors. Even the light fixtures were different, modern geometric things that probably cost more than his monthly salary in Dubai. His confusion lasted exactly 3 seconds before he heard the laughter coming from upstairs. Annie's laughter, that high musical laugh that had made him fall in love with her in college, and a man's voice, low and intimate, saying something that made her giggle in that way she used to giggle with him. Randall's legs moved on autopilot, up the stairs. Each step felt like walking through water. Down the hallway, past the guest bedroom that they'd talked about turning into a nursery someday. Past the bathroom where Annie used to sing off-key in the shower. Past the bedroom that should have been theirs alone. The door was ajar, just a crack, just enough. What he saw through that crack would replay in his mind for months, maybe years. Annie, his wife of 12 years, wrapped in silk sheets he'd never bought her, sheets that probably had some ridiculous thread count he couldn't pronounce. Her head resting on the bare chest of a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury car commercial. Tan, fit, probably 6'2", wearing a Rolex that caught the afternoon light streaming through the window. A window that now had custom plantation shutters instead of the basic blinds Randall had installed. "Randall?" Annie's voice cracked like breaking glass. She shot up in bed, clutching the sheet to her chest, her face draining of all color. The man beside her sat up slowly, casually, like he had all the time in the world. Like this was his house. Like Randall was the intruder. The guy had the audacity to look annoyed at the interruption, his jaw tightening as he assessed Randall with cold, calculating eyes. "Who the hell is this?" the man asked, looking at Annie instead of Randall. His voice carried the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, never facing real consequences. "I'm her husband," Randall said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Flat, dead, like someone else was speaking through his mouth. "And you're in my house." The man laughed. Actually laughed. It was a short, dismissive bark that made Randall's hands curl into fists. "Your house? Annie, what's he talking about?" Annie's eyes darted between them, her mouth opening and closing, like a fish gasping for air. Her hair was different than he remembered. Shorter, highlighted, styled in a way that probably required weekly salon visits. She was wearing makeup, even though it was smudged now, even though they were in bed in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday. Finally, she found words. "Randall, you weren't supposed to. I didn't think you were coming back." "Coming back?" Randall repeated, his brain struggling to process the words. "I've been working in Dubai for 10 years to build us a future. Every paycheck, Annie, Every bonus. I sent money home. For us. For this house. For the life we were supposed to have when I finished my contract. That was years ago, she said, her voice gaining strength, defensiveness creeping in like armor. You stopped sending money 3 years ago. You stopped calling. The video chats became once a month, then once every 2 months. I thought, I thought you'd found someone else over there. I thought you'd moved on and were just too much of a coward to tell me. I stopped sending money because I was saving for this. Randall pulled out his phone, hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it, and showed her his banking app. The number at the top read $340,000. I've been living in a cramped apartment with 3 other engineers, eating rice and beans 6 days a week, working 18-hour days in 110-degree heat so we could retire early. So we could have everything we dreamed about. So you'd never have to work another day if you didn't want to. The man in his bed, got up and started pulling on designer jeans that probably cost more than Randall's entire wardrobe. Dark denim, tailored, with a leather belt that had a subtle designer logo on the buckle. Look, man, I don't know what kind of arrangement you had. Arrangement? Randall turned to him, really looking at him for the first time. Mid-40s maybe. Salt and pepper hair styled perfectly. The kind of tan that came from leisure, not labor. Gold watch, expensive cologne that Randall could smell from 6 feet away. I'm married to her. I bought this house. What arrangement do you think we had? Randall, please. Annie was out of bed now, wrapping herself in a silk robe that Randall had definitely never seen before. Champagne-colored, hitting mid-thigh, probably worth more than the simple cotton robes she used to wear. Let me explain. This is Jesse. He's been helping me. When you stopped communicating regularly, when I was alone in this house month after month, year after year, I needed someone. The house is only 7 years old, Randall interrupted, his engineering mind latching onto concrete facts because emotions were too overwhelming. What repairs could possibly have been necessary? I had it inspected before I left. Everything was up to code. Everything was new. Jesse stepped forward, and Randall noticed he was a few inches taller, broader in the shoulders, the kind of guy who probably played tennis at a country club and called it exercise. I think you need to calm down and let the lady speak. The lady? Randall felt something cold settle in his chest, spreading through his veins like ice water. The lady is my wife, and you need to get the hell out of my house. Actually, Jesse said, pulling a business card from his jeans pocket with the smooth confidence of someone who did this regularly. I'm an attorney, Jesse Morrison, Morrison & Associates, family law specialist, and I think you'll find the situation is more complicated than you realize. He held out the card. Randall didn't take it. He just stared at it, at the embossed lettering, at the downtown address that suggested a successful practice. Of course he was an attorney. Of course, if you enjoy stories of betrayal, sweet revenge, and justice against the entitled, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one you watched and teaches valuable lessons. And tell us in the comments section, what is the most interesting thing about your city that people might not know? Randall stared at the business card still extended toward him. What situation? This is my house. I have the deed. I have the mortgage statements. Everything is in my name. I bought this property in 2017 with money from my engineering contract. My name is on every document. Annie was getting dressed now, her movements jerky, panicked. She pulled on yoga pants, expensive Lululemon ones, he noticed, and a fitted top that he'd never seen before. Her entire wardrobe seemed to have been replaced. Randall, you need to understand. When you stopped responding to my emails, when the calls became once every 2 months, when you'd video chat for 15 minutes and then say you had to get back to work, I thought our marriage was over. I thought you'd moved on. I thought I was just the wife you'd left behind and forgotten about. So you moved another man into our home? Randall's voice was rising now, the shock wearing off, replaced by a hot rage he'd never felt before. His face felt flushed, his hands were trembling. How long, Annie? How long has this been going on? She didn't answer. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face, but she didn't answer. Jesse did. 3 years. Annie and I have been together for 3 years. And during that time, I've invested considerably in this property and in Annie's well-being. I've paid for the kitchen renovation. That was $35,000. I've paid for the bathroom remodels, both of them, another $20,000. I've paid for the flooring, the exterior painting, the landscaping. I bought her that car in the driveway. I've supported her emotionally and financially while you were off building your little nest egg in the Middle East. Her car? Randall pushed past them to the window, his heart hammering. In the driveway sat a silver Mercedes-Benz C-Class, gleaming in the sunlight like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. Next to it was a black BMW 5 Series sedan that undoubtedly belonged to Jesse. His old Toyota Camry, the reliable 2015 model he'd bought used and left for Annie, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the Camry?" "I sold that piece of junk 2 years ago," Annie said quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from the nightstand. "It was falling apart. The transmission was going. The air conditioning didn't work. It had 200,000 miles on it. Jesse bought me the Mercedes." "You sold my car." Randall turned slowly. "You sold my car without asking me." "It was in my name," she said defensively. "You put it in my name before you left, remember? So I could handle the registration and insurance while you were gone." She was right. He had done that. He remembered standing in the DMV, signing the title over to her, thinking he was making her life easier, thinking he was being a good husband. That car was paid off. It was reliable. It had years left in it. "It was embarrassing," Annie shot back, her own anger flaring now. "I'm a high school English teacher. I had to park that beat-up Toyota in the faculty lot next to the other teachers' nice cars. Do you know what that felt like? Do you know how many times students made fun of it, called it my poverty mobile? So you sold it and got a $50,000 Mercedes?" Randall couldn't believe what he was hearing. "48,000, Jesse corrected, and it's a lease, not a purchase. Much more economically sensible." Randall ignored him. "Annie, I was working so you wouldn't have to worry about cars or money or anything. I was building our future." "A future you never included me in," Annie shot back, her face flushed, her voice rising to match his. "You made all these plans without asking me if I wanted to live in Dubai, without asking if I wanted you gone for a decade. You just decided, Randall. You decided for both of us. You took that engineering contract, and you said it was for 3 years, and then it became 5, and then 7, and then 10, and I was supposed to just wait? Just put my life on hold while you chased your career halfway around the world?" There was truth in that. Randall felt it hit him like a physical blow, right in the center of his chest. He had made those decisions. The contract had started as 3 years. Then his company had offered him a promotion if he stayed 2 more years. Then there was a major project that needed his expertise. Then another promotion. And yes, he'd told Annie about each extension. But had he really asked her? Had he given her a choice? Or had he just presented it as a fait accompli, a decision already made? "Annie," Jesse said, putting a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was clearly familiar, protective. "You don't have to explain yourself to him. You don't owe him anything." "Don't touch her," Randall said, his voice low and dangerous. Jesse's hand stayed exactly where it was. His eyes met Randall's with a challenge in them. "Or what? You'll what exactly? Call the police? Tell them you abandoned your wife for 10 years, and now you're angry she moved on? Tell them you're trespassing in a house that's no longer solely yours?" "I didn't abandon anyone. We were married. We were committed. I was working for us." "Where is the operative word?" Jesse interrupted smoothly. "Past tense. Annie filed for divorce 16 months ago, in November of last year." The room tilted. The floor seemed to drop out from under Randall's feet. "What?" Annie wouldn't meet his eyes. She was looking at the floor, at her hands, anywhere but at him. "I sent the papers to your work address in Dubai. I sent them certified mail. Signature required. I got confirmation they were delivered. You never responded. You never contested it. You never called, never emailed, nothing. The divorce was finalized 8 months ago, Randall, in March. We're not married anymore. We haven't been married for 8 months. Randall pulled out his phone again, his fingers fumbling with the screen. He opened his email app, went to his work email account, scrolled through his spam folder. There, buried among hundreds of automated notifications and filtered messages, was an email from Morrison and Associates law firm. The subject line read, "Final Divorce Decree, O'Neill versus O'Neill. Case number FL 2023-8847. The date stamp was from March 15th of this year. 8 months ago, just like she'd said. He opened it. There was a PDF attachment. He clicked it with trembling fingers. The document was official. Court seal, judge's signature, everything. Dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Annie Marie O'Neill. Respondent, Randall David O'Neill. Grounds, irreconcilable differences and abandonment. Default judgment entered due to respondent's failure to respond. Division of assets to be determined at later hearing." "I never saw this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I never... Why would you send it to my work email? You know I barely check that. All our communication was through my personal..." "I sent it to both," Annie said. And now she was looking at him, her eyes red but defiant. "I sent it to your personal email, your work email, your LinkedIn account. I sent physical copies to your work address and to the last apartment address you gave me. I tried for months, Randall. I sent multiple notices. I tried to reach you on WhatsApp, on Facebook Messenger, on every platform we'd ever used. You never responded to any of it, not once. And then I gave up. I thought maybe you wanted the divorce too. Maybe you'd found someone in Dubai, and this was your way of letting me go without having to say the words." Randall scrolled frantically through his personal email now. There they were, emails from Morrison and Associates, emails from Annie, emails with subject lines like important legal documents and divorce proceedings and final notice. All of them marked as spam by his email filter. All of them unread. He clicked on one dated 14 months ago, one of the first. It was from Annie's personal email address. "Randall, I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to someone who's never here. I can't keep waiting for a life that's never going to happen. I'm filing for divorce. You'll receive the official papers from my attorney. Please read them. Please respond. Even if you hate me, even if you think I'm making a mistake, please just respond so we can handle this properly. I'm sorry it came to this. I really am. Annie." He remembered that time period, November of last year. He'd been in the middle of a massive infrastructure project, working 20-hour days, barely sleeping. His company had upgraded their email system around then, and the new spam filters had been aggressive, catching everything that wasn't directly work-related. He'd complained about it to the IT department, said he'd deal with it later. But later had never come. The project had consumed him, and then there was another project and another, and he'd forgotten about the email issues entirely. "This is a mistake," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I never got these emails. I never agreed to a divorce. The marriage is still valid. It has to be." "It's not," Jesse said, and there was something in his voice now that almost sounded like pity. Almost. "California allows for default divorce when one party doesn't respond." Annie followed all the legal requirements. She sent notice to multiple addresses, both physical and electronic. She waited the required time period. She published notice in a local newspaper, as required by law when direct contact fails. She did everything by the book. The court granted the divorce in absentia, in your absence. It's final, Randall. It's been final for 8 months. "In absentia," Randall repeated numbly. The Latin phrase felt heavy on his tongue. "Like I'm dead. Like I don't exist." "Like you were absent," Jesse corrected, "which you were. For 10 years you were absent from your wife's life." The court recognized that reality and acted accordingly. "You're telling me I flew home to my wife, to my house, and I don't have either anymore?" Randall's voice was rising again, cracking. "You're telling me I spent 10 years working myself to exhaustion, living like a monk, saving every penny, and it's all for nothing?" "The house is a different matter," Jesse said, and now his tone shifted, becoming more businesslike, more professional. Under California community property law, Annie is entitled to 50% of all marital assets accumulated during the marriage. That includes this house, which was purchased in 2017 during your marriage. It doesn't matter whose name is on the deed or who made the mortgage payments. Community property means it belongs to both of you equally. With money I earned. With money earned during the marriage, which makes it community property under California law, Jesse said patiently, like he was explaining something to a child. I've been advising Annie on this matter. The house was appraised last month at $480,000. That's current market value based on the improvements made and the neighborhood appreciation. Annie's share is $240,000. My suggestion is that you buy her out for that amount or sell the property and split the proceeds. Those are your two options. Randall felt like he was drowning, like the walls were closing in. $240,000? I'd have to give her $240,000 for a house I bought with my own money? A house I've been paying the mortgage on for 7 years? Community property, Jesse said again, like it was a magic phrase that explained everything. And before you get any ideas about fighting this in court, you should know that Annie has documented everything. Every month you were gone, every missed call, every holiday she spent alone, every anniversary that passed without you even sending a card, every email you didn't respond to. Any judge will see a clear case of abandonment and failure to maintain the marital relationship. You'll lose, Randall. You'll spend thousands on legal fees and you'll still lose. He's right, Annie said softly. I kept records, Randall. I had to, for my own protection. I have text messages showing I tried to reach you. I have call logs, I have emails. I have photos of me alone at Christmas, alone on my birthday, alone at my father's funeral. Do you remember that? 2 years ago, my father died, and you couldn't even fly home for 3 days for the funeral. Randall remembered. The funeral had conflicted with a critical phase of his project. He'd sent flowers. He'd called Annie and talked to her for an hour. He'd thought that was enough. Looking at her face now, he realized it hadn't been anywhere close to enough. I'm sorry about your father, he said quietly. I should have been there. Yes, Annie said, tears streaming down her face again. You should have, but you weren't. You were never there, Randall. And eventually I had to accept that you were never going to be there. That's why I filed for divorce. That's why I moved on. Because I couldn't spend the rest of my life waiting for someone who was never coming home. They had no idea what was coming. Neither Annie nor her lawyer boyfriend understood that Randall hadn't spent 10 years just working. He'd spent 10 years learning how contracts worked, how to spot loopholes and inconsistencies. Learning property law because he'd helped his company navigate international real estate deals worth millions of dollars. Learning patience, strategy, and how to identify people's weaknesses and exploit them without them ever seeing it coming. And right now, standing in his bedroom that wasn't legally his bedroom anymore, watching his ex-wife, God, that hurt, and her attorney lover smirk at him like they'd won some kind of game, Randall made a decision. He wasn't going to rage. He wasn't going to break things or make threats or do anything that could be used against him in court. He was going to do something much, much worse. He was going to outthink them. He was going to find every mistake they'd made, every corner they'd cut, every lie they'd told. And he was going to use the law, their law, the system they thought they controlled, to take everything back. Okay, Randall said calmly. Too calmly. Annie's eyes narrowed. She knew that tone. She'd heard it once before, years ago, when her sister had tried to scam them out of their wedding money by claiming she'd paid for decorations she'd never ordered. Randall had smiled at her sister, agreed to pay her, and then produced receipts proving the sister had actually pocketed the money. The sister had ended up having to repay everything, plus damages. You're right, I should have responded to the divorce papers. I should have been more present. That's on me. Jesse blinked, clearly surprised. He'd expected more fight. So you'll agree to the buyout terms? I need time to think, Randall said carefully. And I need to see all the documentation. The divorce decree, the property appraisal, all the financial records. I want to make sure everything was done properly according to the law. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Jesse said. But there was suspicion in his voice now. He wasn't stupid. He could sense something had shifted. Everything was handled through proper legal channels. I'll have my office send you copies of all relevant documents. I'd appreciate that. Randall picked up his suitcase. Annie, I'll get a hotel for tonight. I need some time to process all this. I'll have my attorney contact you about the next steps. You have an attorney? Annie asked, surprise evident in her voice. I will by tomorrow, Randall said. This is a legal matter now. It requires legal representation. He headed for the door, then paused at the threshold. One more question. One small detail that was nagging at him. The mortgage. I've been paying it automatically from my Dubai account this whole time. $1,800 a month. Who's been getting that money? Annie and Jesse exchanged a look. It was quick, barely a second, but Randall caught it. A guilty look. A look that said they knew something he didn't, and they weren't sure whether to tell him. The mortgage was paid off 2 years ago, Annie said slowly, reluctantly. In October of 2022, Jesse paid the remaining balance as a gift to me. Randall's mind started calculating. October 2022, 2 years ago, but he'd been paying $1,800 a month since then, 24 months. That was $43,200, he said out loud. I've paid $43,200 into an account for a mortgage that doesn't exist anymore? The payments kept coming, Annie said quickly. I didn't know they would keep coming. The bank account stayed open, and the transfers just kept happening automatically. And I thought maybe it was some kind of escrow account or... Where's the money, Annie? Randall interrupted. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. Where did $43,200 of my money go? Another exchanged look. Jesse cleared his throat. Annie, you don't have to answer that right now. We should speak with our attorney first. Our attorney, Randall said. I thought you were her attorney. I'm advising her in a personal capacity, Jesse said stiffly. Any official legal matters would be handled by my firm, not by me directly, to avoid conflicts of interest. Because you're sleeping with the client, Randall finished. Right, that makes perfect sense. Very ethical. He walked out before either of them could respond. Down the stairs through the living room full of furniture bought with another man's money. Out the front door of the house he'd worked himself half to death to buy. The California sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. Beautiful colors that felt wrong somehow, too cheerful for the moment. Randall stood on the lawn, his lawn, legally speaking, or at least half his lawn, and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. Hassan Ahmed, his closest friend from the Dubai engineering team. Hassan had been his confidant, his drinking buddy on their rare days off. And, most importantly, Hassan had a younger brother who'd gone to law school in California. Hassan, yeah, it's Randall. Listen, I need a favor. That buddy of yours from law school, the one who specializes in property disputes, is he still practicing in California? I need his number, now. Hassan asked why, of course, and Randall gave him the abbreviated version. The words felt strange coming out of his mouth, like he was describing someone else's life. Came home. Found wife with another man. Divorce I never knew about. House I might lose. Brother, Hassan said, his accent thick with concern. This is serious. You need a good lawyer. The best. My friend David, he's the one you want. David Okonkwo. He's expensive, but he's worth it. I'll text you his number right now. The text came through 30 seconds later. Randall saved the number and immediately placed the call, not caring that it was almost 7 p.m. The phone rang 4 times before someone answered. Okonkwo Law. A man's voice, young, alert. Is this David Okonkwo? Speaking. Who's this? My name is Randall O'Neill. Hassan Ahmed gave me your number. I need legal representation immediately. It's regarding a fraudulent divorce decree and possible property fraud. There was a pause. Then, Hassan's friend from Dubai? He just texted me about you. Said you were in trouble. Talk to me. What happened? What happened next would change everything. But in that moment, standing outside his house that wasn't quite his house anymore, with the sun setting and the November air turning cold, Randall O'Neill made a promise to himself. He would get justice, not through violence or intimidation, through the law, through the same system that had taken everything from him without his knowledge. He would use it to take everything right back, and neither Annie nor her shark attorney boyfriend would see it coming until it was too late. Randall checked into the Riverside Inn, a mid-range hotel near the highway that smelled like industrial cleaning products and broken dreams. The room was small, a queen bed, a desk, a TV mounted on the wall, but it was clean and it was his. $39 a night for the weekly rate. He'd paid for the whole week up front in cash. It was nearly midnight before he could bring himself to open his laptop. The divorce decree was there in his spam folder, along with dozens of other emails he'd never seen, never read, never responded to. Annie's attorney, Morrison and Associates, had been thorough, maybe too thorough. Every email was formatted identically, with the same legal footer, the same case number, the same reference to O'Neill vs. O'Neill, case number FL 2923 8.47. All of them sent from the same email address, legalmorrisonassociateslaw.com. Something about that bugged Randall. He'd worked with enough attorneys in his engineering career to know that law firms usually personalize their correspondence. Different attorneys had different styles, different signatures, different approaches, but these emails were all identical, like they'd been generated from a template, like someone had created them all at once and scheduled them to send at different times. He called Hassan back. It was 8 in the morning in Dubai, which meant his former colleague would be at the construction site already, wearing his yellow safety vest and barking orders at the crew in a mixture of English and Arabic. "Hassan, I need you to check something for me," Randall said. "The divorce papers Annie's attorney sent through the company email system. Is there any way to verify when they were actually delivered versus when they claim they were delivered?" "Metadata," Hassan said immediately. "Every email has headers that show the real routing information. Timestamps, server details, IP addresses. If someone backdated an email, the headers would show the discrepancy." "Why? You think they backdated something?" "I think I want to know for sure. Give me until tomorrow. I'll talk to Rashid in IT. He owes me a favor after I covered for him when he was late to that safety meeting." Hassan promised to call back with information. Randall hung up and started making a list on a piece of hotel stationery. Everything he knew, everything he suspected, everything that didn't add up. Divorce finalized 8 months ago, March 2024. Jesse and Annie together for 3 years, started 2021. Mortgage paid off 2 years ago, October 2022. Payments continued from Randall's account, 4,800 month x 24 months versus 43,200. Annie sold his car without his knowledge, approximately 2022. House appraised at $480,000 last month. All divorce notification emails formatted identically. Jesse is both Annie's attorney and her boyfriend. That last point stuck out. There was something unethical about that, wasn't there? An attorney wasn't supposed to have romantic relationships with their clients during active cases. It was a conflict of interest. It compromised their professional judgment. Randall made a note to ask David Okonkwo about it. The property appraisal bothered him too. $480,000 seemed high for the neighborhood. Randall pulled up his laptop and started researching. He found Zillow, Redfin, real estate databases. The house next door to his had sold 3 months ago for $425,000. 2 houses down had gone for $415,000. Another house on the same street, slightly larger than his, had sold for $442,000. The market was good. Riverside, California had appreciated nicely over the past few years, but not $480,000 good. Not for a 2,200 square foot colonial in a neighborhood that was nice but not luxurious, convenient but not prestigious. Who had done the appraisal? Randall dug through the divorce documents until he found the property valuation report. There it was, stamped and official looking. Morrison Property Valuation Services, LLC, Independent Real Estate Appraisal. Morrison, the same last name as Jesse. "Son of a bitch," Randall whispered to the empty hotel room. He spent the rest of the night researching. Google became his best friend. Jesse Morrison, age 42, senior partner at Morrison and Associates law firm. Graduated from UCLA Law School in 2008. Specialized in family law and property disputes. Licensed in California since 2009. Also happened to own Morrison Property Valuation Services through an LLC registered in 2019. Also happened to have a somewhat checkered history when you dug deep enough. Randall found a complaint filed with the California State Bar 3 years ago. Allegation: conflict of interest in a divorce case. The complaint had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence, but the details were interesting. A man named Robert O'Neill, no relation, had accused Jesse of having an inappropriate relationship with his wife during their divorce proceedings and then profiting from the property settlement. The complaint alleged that Jesse had overvalued the marital home, forcing Robert to buy out his wife at an inflated price, and then Jesse had moved in with the wife immediately after the divorce was finalized. There was a Yelp review from the same time period, written by someone with the username Robert C1979. This guy is a snake. He stole my wife and my house, used his position as her attorney to manipulate the situation. Avoid at all costs. The review had been flagged as inappropriate and removed, but Randall found it cached on an internet archive site. He screenshot it, saved it, added it to his growing file of evidence. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind, and drop a comment below telling me what you think Randall should do next. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Randall called the number Hassan had given him. David Okonkwo answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. Hassan said you'd be calling. He told me about your situation. I'm intrigued. Intrigued enough to take the case? I don't take cases I can't win, David said. His voice was confident, measured, the voice of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Come to my office at noon. Bring every document you have. And Randall, if what Hassan told me is true, you might have more than just a property dispute here. You might have fraud, embezzlement, professional misconduct. This could get very interesting. David's office was in a renovated industrial building in downtown Riverside, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The waiting area had modern furniture and legal journals neatly arranged on a coffee table. A young receptionist with purple hair and a nose ring greeted Randall and told him Mr. Okonkwo would be right out. David Okonkwo emerged 2 minutes later. He was younger than Randall expected, maybe early 30s, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that fit perfectly. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark skin, short hair, and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog everything in seconds. His handshake was firm, professional. Mr. O'Neill, come on back. His office was organized chaos. Law books on shelves, files stacked on the desk. A whiteboard covered in notes and diagrams. 2 computer monitors displayed legal documents and property records. David gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Sit. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out, even if you think it's not important. Randall talked for 45 minutes straight. He started with leaving for Dubai 10 years ago. The gradual breakdown of communication with Annie, coming home to find her with Jesse Morrison, the divorce he'd never known about, the property appraisal that seemed too high. He showed David the emails he'd found in his spam folder, the bank statements showing the continued mortgage payments, the property records he'd researched online. David took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Randall finished, David leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Okay, let's break this down. You've potentially got several things happening here. Several? First, the divorce itself. California allows for default divorce when one party doesn't respond, but there are procedures that must be followed exactly. If those procedures weren't followed correctly, the divorce could be invalidated. Second, the mortgage payments. If Annie knew the mortgage was paid off and didn't inform you that your automatic payments were going into her personal account, that's fraud. That's theft. Third, the property appraisal. If Jesse overvalued the property to force a higher buyout payment, and he used his own appraisal company to do it, that's another fraud. And fourth, Jesse's relationship with Annie during the divorce proceedings. That's a massive ethical violation for an attorney. So what can we do? David pulled up something on his computer. Let me make a call first. I have a contact at the county records office. He dialed from his desk phone, put it on speaker. Jennifer, it's David Okonkwo. I need you to pull records on a loan account for me. Sure thing, David. What's the account number? David looked at Randall, who rattled off the numbers from his bank statement. Jennifer put them on hold. Music played for 3 minutes. Then she came back on the line. Okay, I've got it. Mortgage account for 2247 Maple Ridge Drive, Riverside. Original loan amount $310,000 in 2017. Satisfied in full in October 2022 with a lump sum payment of $280,000. That was the remaining balance at the time. Who made the payment? David asked. Let me check. It came from an LLC. Morrison Holdings, LLC. Registered agent is a Jesse L. Morrison. David's eyebrows went up. He glanced at Randall, then back at the phone. And after the mortgage was satisfied, what happened to the account? Looks like it was converted to a regular checking account. Name on the account changed to Annie M. O'Neill, sole owner. Wait, that's weird. What's weird? The automatic payment setup wasn't canceled. It's still active, pulling funds from, looks like an international account. Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The payments are still coming in monthly, $800 each. So someone's been depositing money into Annie O'Neill's personal account for the last 2 years? That's what it looks like. The deposits are still happening. Last one was 3 days ago, November 4th, 2024. David thanked her and hung up. He turned to Randall with a smile that was equal parts professional and predatory. You're not going to believe this. Try me. I've had a lot of unbelievable things happen in the last 24 hours. The mortgage was paid off in October 2022 by Jesse Morrison, just like Annie said. But here's the thing. The account stayed open. And instead of being a mortgage account, it became a regular checking account in Annie's name only. And your automatic payments, they kept coming every month for the last 2 years. That's not an accident, Randall. That's not a mistake. Annie knew those payments were coming in. She never told you the mortgage was paid off. She never redirected those payments. She never mentioned that you were essentially giving her $800 a month in free money. That's fraud. That's embezzlement. That's a dozen different civil violations and at least 2 criminal ones. Randall felt something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. She's been stealing from me. Technically, you've been making unauthorized deposits into her account. But the fact that she never told you the mortgage was paid off, never redirected those payments, never mentioned that you were giving her free money every month, that's fraud by omission. And the fact that Jesse knew about it, because he had to have known he's her attorney and her boyfriend, that makes him complicit, an accessory. What can we do? David's smile widened. We can do a lot, Randall. But first, I need you to tell me something honestly. Do you want your house back, or do you want revenge? I want what's fair. That's not what I asked. Randall thought about Annie's face when he'd walked into that bedroom. The casual dismissal, the way she'd justified everything, the way Jesse had stood there in his designer jeans and expensive watch, smirking at Randall like he was nothing, like he was just some inconvenient obstacle to be dealt with and discarded. I want both, Randall said. David nodded slowly, like Randall had just passed some kind of test. Then here's what we're going to do. The strategy session lasted 3 hours. David laid out a plan that was methodical, thorough, and absolutely devastating. First, they would file an emergency motion to freeze all assets related to the divorce settlement. Second, they would submit the bank records showing the continued mortgage payments as evidence of fraud. Third, they would request a new independent property appraisal from a certified appraiser with no connection to either party. And fourth, this was the part that made Randall's heart race. They would file a formal complaint with the California State Bar against Jesse Morrison. You can't have a romantic relationship with your client during active legal proceedings, David explained. It's a clear conflict of interest. You can't represent someone in a divorce and then also benefit from the divorce settlement. You can't use your own property valuation company to appraise an asset that you stand to benefit from. And you especially can't do all 3 of those things while also knowing that your client is fraudulently accepting money from her ex-husband. Jesse Morrison has violated so many ethical rules that I lost count. Will it work? It'll work. Trust me. I've handled cases like this before. Attorneys who get too greedy, too confident. They think they're smarter than everyone else. They think they can bend the rules because they know the rules. But there's always a paper trail. Always. And Jesse Morrison left a trail a mile wide. The next week was a blur of paperwork and legal maneuvering. David filed the emergency motion with the family court. He submitted the bank records, the property comparables, the evidence of Jesse's other questionable cases. He prepared a 40-page complaint to the state bar documenting every ethical violation Jesse had committed. And then he did something Randall hadn't expected. He reached out to the other ex-husbands, the men who'd left reviews, filed complaints, accused Jesse Morrison of stealing their wives and their assets. David found 5 of them. 3 agreed to provide statements. 1 agreed to testify in court if necessary. Pattern of behavior, David explained. That's what we're establishing. This isn't a one-time mistake. This is Jesse Morrison's business model. He identifies unhappy wives in divorce proceedings, starts relationships with them while he's representing them, overvalues the marital property to force high buyout payments, and then moves in with the wives after the divorces are finalized. And in at least 3 cases, he eventually bought the properties himself through shell companies at prices well below the appraised values. That's fraud. That's racketeering, arguably. That's enough to get him disbarred, sued, and possibly criminally prosecuted. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late November, just before Thanksgiving. Judge Sarah Whitmore presiding. Randall showed up in his best suit, the one he'd bought for business meetings with oil executives in Dubai, and took a seat behind David at the plaintiff's table. The courtroom was small, traditional, with wood paneling and a California state flag in the corner. Annie and Jesse arrived 15 minutes later. Annie was wearing a designer dress that probably cost $500, black with a modest neckline and hem just above the knee. Conservative, respectable, the kind of thing a defendant wears when they want to look trustworthy. Jesse was in a navy suit with a red tie, looking every inch the successful attorney. They were accompanied by another lawyer, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Jesse had brought in a partner from his firm to represent him. That told Randall everything about how seriously he was taking this. They took seats at the defendant's table. Jesse glanced over at Randall once, his expression unreadable. Annie wouldn't look at Randall at all. She kept her eyes fixed on the table in front of her, her hands folded, her face pale. "All rise," the bailiff said. "The Superior Court of California, County of Riverside, is now in session. The Honorable Judge Sarah Whitmore presiding." Judge Whitmore entered from a side door. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked like someone's kindly grandmother until she sat down and fixed the room with a stare that could freeze nitrogen. "Be seated. We're here for the matter of O'Neill versus O'Neill, case number FL 2023-88847. Mr. Okonkwo, you filed an emergency motion to freeze assets and vacate a divorce decree. That's a serious request." David stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We believe the divorce decree was obtained fraudulently, and we have evidence that the defendant has been engaged in a pattern of fraud and embezzlement during and after the divorce proceedings." "That's a serious accusation. Miss Brennan, your response?" Jesse's attorney stood. "Carol Brennan," according to the nameplate on the table. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of buyer's remorse. Mr. O'Neill abandoned his wife for 10 years, failed to respond to properly served divorce papers, and now wants to undo a final decree because he's unhappy with the outcome. The law doesn't work that way." "The law also doesn't allow fraud, Ms. Brennan," Judge Whitmore said. "Mr. Okonkwo, what evidence do you have?" David opened his laptop. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit several pieces of evidence. First, bank records showing that Mr. O'Neill's ex-wife has been accepting automatic payments into her personal account for the last 2 years. Payments totaling $43,200. Payments that Mr. O'Neill believed were going toward a mortgage that was, in fact, already paid off 2 years ago. Paid off, I should note, by Mr. Jesse Morrison, Ms. O'Neill's current romantic partner." Judge Whitmore put on her reading glasses and studied the documents David handed up to the bailiff. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of paper. After a full minute, she looked up. "Ms. O'Neill, is this accurate? Has your ex-husband been depositing $1,800 per month into your account for the last 2 years?" Annie stood slowly. She looked smaller than she had in the bedroom, diminished somehow. Yes, Your Honor, the payments kept coming after the mortgage was paid off. I didn't know they would keep coming. The account just, it was set up automatically and I didn't realize. You didn't realize you were receiving $1,800 a month? Judge Whitmore's voice was sharp. For 2 years, that's over $43,000. Ms. O'Neill, you didn't notice $43,000 appearing in your account. Yes, I noticed, but Jesse said what? Annie glanced at Jesse, who was whispering urgently with his attorney. Jesse said it was complicated. He said because the payments were automatic and we didn't know when Randall would notice, we should just let it be until the divorce was final. He said it would complicate things if I tried to return the money before the property settlement was complete. Judge Whitmore removed her glasses. Mr. Morrison, you advised your client, who was also, I gather, your romantic partner, to continue accepting payments that she knew were based on a paid-off mortgage? Payments that her husband believed were going toward a debt that no longer existed? Jesse stood. For the first time since Randall had met him, he didn't look confident. He looked cornered. Your Honor, I advised my client that the situation was legally complex. The automatic payments weren't technically fraud because Mr. O'Neill had set them up himself. Your advice was to let your girlfriend pocket $43,000 of her ex-husband's money without telling him the mortgage was paid off? The judge's voice could have cut glass. Mr. Morrison, what were you thinking? I was protecting my client's interests, Jesse said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your client? Or your girlfriend? Or yourself? Judge Whitmore shuffled through more papers. I'm looking at the property appraisal submitted in the original divorce proceedings. Morrison Property Valuation Services, LLC. That's your company, isn't it, Mr. Morrison? I own it, yes, but it's operated independently. By whom? Who conducted the appraisal? Jesse hesitated. I supervised the appraisal, but a licensed appraiser did the actual. Who works for you? Who you pay? Who has a financial interest in making you happy? Judge Whitmore put the papers down. Mr. Okonkwo, you said there was more? If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Randall's situation. David stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor. We've identified a pattern of behavior. Mr. Morrison has been involved in 17 divorce cases over the past 5 years where he represented the wife. In 12 of those cases, Morrison Property Valuation Services conducted the appraisal. In 9 of those cases, Mr. Morrison began romantic relationships with the wives during or immediately after the divorce proceedings. And in 7 cases, properties that Mr. Morrison's company appraised at high values were later sold at significantly lower prices to buyers connected to Mr. Morrison's business interests. The courtroom erupted. Carol Brennan was on her feet, objecting. Annie was crying. Jesse was pale, his jaw clenched. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel once, sharply. Order! Ms. Brennan, sit down. Mr. Morrison, do you have a response to these allegations? Jesse was on his phone now, typing frantically. His attorney was whispering to him urgently. Finally, he stood. Your Honor, these allegations are taken out of context. My professional conduct has always been. Your professional conduct is exactly what's in question here, Judge Whitmore interrupted. This court will not be party to fraud, Mr. Morrison. The divorce decree is hereby vacated pending a full evidentiary hearing. All assets are frozen. Ms. O'Neill, you are ordered to cease any further spending from the account containing Mr. O'Neill's payments. Mr. Morrison, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar for immediate investigation. And if I find out that you've engaged in a pattern of defrauding clients and ex-husbands, I will personally ensure that you never practice law in this state again. Your Honor, Carol Brennan tried again, your client has a lot of explaining to do, Ms. Brennan. This hearing is adjourned. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a full review of all financial transactions related to this marriage and divorce. Mr. O'Neill, you're free to return to your home. Ms. O'Neill, you have 72 hours to vacate the property. Bailiff, next case. The gavel came down. It was over. Randall sat back in his chair, barely able to process what had just happened. He felt David's hand on his shoulder, a brief squeeze of congratulations. Across the aisle, Annie was sobbing into her hands. Jesse was on his phone, calling someone, probably another attorney, his face flushed with anger and fear. But Randall didn't feel triumphant. He felt empty, hollow. He'd won, but it felt like losing. Because the marriage was still over. The trust was still broken. The life he'd imagined was still gone. Still, justice had been served. And sometimes that had to be enough. That evening, Randall sat in his hotel room and stared at his phone. There were 17 missed calls from Annie, 12 text messages. The texts had started apologetic and devolved into desperate. "Please call me Randall. I'm so sorry I didn't know what Jesse was doing. He said everything was legal. Please, I need to talk to you. Where am I supposed to go? I have nowhere to go." Randall didn't respond. Not yet. He needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. His phone rang again. He almost didn't answer. But the caller ID showed Hassan's number. "Randall, Habibi, I've got the information you wanted." Rashid pulled the email metadata. "And the divorce notification emails, the ones Annie's attorney supposedly sent you? They're backdated, all of them. The metadata shows they were all created on the same day, October 15th of last year. But they were sent out over a period of several weeks with timestamps that made it look like they'd been sent on different dates. That's illegal. Very illegal. It means Annie and her lawyer were planning the divorce strategy before she even filed. They created a paper trail to make it look like they'd done everything properly, but they were really just trying to stack the deck. They knew you wouldn't see the emails because of your spam filter, and they deliberately spaced them out to make it look legitimate. Hassan, you're a lifesaver. Just don't get married again without a prenup, yeah?" Randall called David immediately and relayed the information. David was quiet for a long moment. "This changes things. This isn't just sloppy legal work. This is premeditation. This is conspiracy. Randall, with this evidence, we can go after Jesse criminally. We're talking wire fraud, possibly racketeering under RICO statutes." "I don't want him in prison," Randall said, surprising himself. "I just want what's fair." Fair would be him losing his license and paying restitution. But fair might also include some jail time. He's done this to multiple people, Randall. You're not his first victim. If you don't stop him, he'll do it again to someone else. Randall thought about the other ex-husbands David had found. Men who'd lost their homes, their savings, their families. Men who'd been manipulated by someone they'd trusted to help them through one of the hardest times in their lives. "Do what you think is right," Randall finally said. "I trust your judgment." David filed the expanded complaint the next morning, not just against Jesse Morrison personally, but against his law firm, his property valuation company, and the LLC he'd used to buy undervalued properties. The complaint was 53 pages long and included statements from 4 of the ex-husbands, the email metadata from Hassan, and a forensic analysis of Jesse's business dealings over the past 5 years. The California State Bar launched a formal investigation that afternoon. The district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation 2 days later, and 1 week after that, the local news ran a story. Prominent Riverside attorney under investigation for multi-year fraud scheme. The story went semi-viral. Not national news, but it made the rounds on legal blogs and Reddit. People started coming forward with their own stories about Jesse Morrison. More ex-husbands, a few ex-wives who'd realized after the fact that they'd been manipulated. Even some current clients who suddenly had questions about their case strategies. Morrison and Associates issued a statement saying that Jesse had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Within a week, his name was removed from the firm's website. Within 2 weeks, the firm quietly changed its name to Brennan and Associates. Jesse Morrison's carefully constructed life was falling apart in real time. Annie called Randall again. He answered this time. "Randall, I need to talk to you. Please, I've been staying with my mom in Nevada, but I need to explain. I need you to understand." "I'm listening. Can we meet in person? There are things I can't say over the phone." They met at a coffee shop in downtown Riverside neutral territory 3 days later. Annie arrived first, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. She looked different, thinner, paler, no makeup, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of the designer clothes Randall had seen her in. She looked more like the Annie he'd married 12 years ago. young, uncertain, vulnerable. Randall sat down across from her. He'd bought himself a black coffee. They sat in awkward silence for a moment before Annie spoke. "I was angry at you," she said quietly. "For years I was so angry. You left, and you kept saying you'd be home soon. But soon never came, and I was alone. All our friends were getting married, having kids, building lives together, and I was the woman whose husband was always somewhere else. People would ask about you, and I'd make excuses. He's working, I'd say. He's building our future. But after a while, it just felt like abandonment. I was working for us," Randall said. I know you were. But it didn't feel like us, Randall. It felt like you made a decision for both of us, and I was supposed to just go along with it. And when you extended your contract from 3 years to 5, and then to 7, and then to 10, I felt like I didn't matter. Like my feelings, my life, my dreams, they were all secondary to your career. There was truth in that. Randall had made those decisions. He'd told Annie about them, but he'd never really asked her permission. He'd assumed she'd understand. He'd assumed the money would make up for his absence. "I should have come home more," Randall admitted. "I should have made you a priority. And I should have told you how I was feeling instead of letting the resentment build." Annie wiped her eyes with a napkin. "When I met Jesse, I was so lonely. He was attentive. He listened to me. He was there, physically there, which is something you hadn't been in years. And when he started suggesting the divorce, at first I resisted, but he was so convincing. He said you'd moved on. He said men who stay overseas that long always find someone else. He said I deserved to be happy, that I'd wasted enough of my life waiting." "Did you love him?" Annie was quiet for a long moment. "I thought I did, but now I think I love the attention. I loved having someone there. I love not being alone anymore." "Jesse himself? I don't know. When he got arrested yesterday." "He got arrested?" "Wire fraud charges. His bail is set at $500,000. His firm won't put it up. His family won't help. He's in county jail." Annie's voice was hollow. "And suddenly I realized that everything he'd told me, all his promises, all his plans, they were lies. He was using me. He was using the divorce to profit, and I helped him do it because I was too blinded by my own anger to see what was really happening." "I'm sorry," Randall said, and he meant it. "Don't be sorry. I made my choices. I own them." Annie pulled an envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. "This is a check for $43,200. All the mortgage payments you made after the house was paid off, plus $8,240 in interest calculated at 2% annually. I borrowed against my teacher's pension to get the money. It's all I could access." Randall looked at the check. It was from a credit union in Nevada, made out to him, signed in Annie's handwriting. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. It's your money. I stole it, even if Jesse told me it was okay to keep it. I stole from you." She pushed another piece of paper across the table. "This is a quitclaim deed. I'm signing over all my interest in the house to you. No buyout, no settlement. It's yours. It was always yours. I just took advantage of your absence to try to take it from you." Randall picked up the deed. It was already notarized, ready to file. "Annie, the house is worth $425,000. Half of that is $225,000. You're entitled to—" "I'm not entitled to anything," Annie interrupted. "I forfeited any claim to that house when I let another man move in. When I let him pay off the mortgage and then pretended like it was mine. When I accepted your money for 2 years without telling you the truth. I don't want your money, Randall. I just want to make this right. As right as I can, anyway." "What will you do?" "I have my teaching job in Nevada. It pays okay. Not great, but okay. I have a small apartment. I'm in therapy, real therapy this time, with a licensed psychologist who's not trying to sleep with me. I'm working on figuring out who I am when I'm not angry, when I'm not dependent on someone else, when I'm not looking for someone to fill the holes in my life." She managed a weak smile. "Turns out I'm kind of a mess, but I'm working on it." "I'm glad." They sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop was busy around them, people typing on laptops, having meetings, living their normal lives while Randall and Annie tried to figure out how to untangle 12 years of marriage and 3 years of lies. "I destroyed us," Annie said finally. "I destroyed what we had because I was angry and lonely and selfish. And I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry, Randall. You deserved better than what I did to you." "I deserved better communication," Randall corrected gently. "And you deserved a husband who was actually present. We both made mistakes. Your mistake was working too much. Mine was having an affair and trying to steal your house." "When you put it that way," they both laughed, a brief moment of dark humor in the wreckage of their marriage. Then Annie stood up. "I should go. I have a long drive back to Nevada. But Randall, I hope you find someone who appreciates what you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. You deserved a better wife than I was. You deserve happiness." She left before he could respond. Randall watched her walk out of the coffee shop, climb into her old Honda Civic, the car he'd bought years ago, the car she'd sold and then bought back, and drive away. He felt a strange sense of closure, like a door had been shut that had been hanging open for too long. His phone buzzed. Text from David. "Jesse Morrison pleaded guilty this morning. 2 years county jail, permanent disbarment, 850 KI in restitution to multiple victims. He's done." Randall typed back. "And Annie?" "She cooperated with the prosecution, testified against him. No charges filed. DA said she was a victim too, manipulated by someone in a position of power." That seemed fair. Annie had made terrible choices, but Jesse had orchestrated the whole thing. He'd used his legal expertise, his charm, his position of authority to manipulate a lonely, angry woman into helping him commit fraud. Annie was guilty, yes, but Jesse was the mastermind. Over the next few weeks, Randall settled back into his house. The first thing he did was hire movers to remove all the furniture Jesse had bought. The leather couch, the expensive art, the designer lamps, all of it went to a consignment shop. Randall replaced it with simple, comfortable furniture that he actually liked. Nothing designer, nothing expensive, just functional pieces that felt like home. He sold the Mercedes-Benz that Jesse had bought for Annie and bought himself a new Toyota Camry. Reliable, practical, paid in cash. He took David's advice and started the property inspection business. O'Neill Home Inspections, LLC. It turned out that having an engineering background made him excellent at spotting problems in houses, foundation cracks, electrical issues, water damage, structural concerns. And his story, which had been covered in the local news, gave him instant credibility. People trusted him. They knew he was the guy who'd exposed a corrupt lawyer. They knew he couldn't be bought or manipulated. Within 3 months, he had more business than he could handle alone. He hired 2 assistant inspectors, one a recent engineering graduate, the other a contractor with 30 years of experience. Within 6 months, he'd opened a second office in San Diego. Within a year, O'Neill Home Inspections was one of the most respected firms in Southern California. The work was satisfying in a way that his overseas engineering projects had never been. He was helping people make informed decisions about the biggest purchases of their lives. He was protecting families from predatory sellers and bad deals. He was making a real, tangible difference. And he was home every night, sleeping in his own bed. Annie kept sending her payments, $500 a month, just like she'd promised, even though he'd told her it wasn't necessary. He deposited them into a savings account and didn't touch them. He figured he'd give the money back to her eventually, maybe when she'd paid off half of what she owed. She was trying to make amends. He could respect that. They exchanged occasional emails, brief updates on their lives. She was doing well in Nevada. Therapy was helping. She joined a support group for people who'd been manipulated by narcissists. She was learning to trust her own judgment again, to recognize red flags, to set boundaries. Randall didn't respond to most of her emails, but he read them. And sometimes late at night, he found himself typing responses he never sent. Things like, "I'm glad you're doing better," or "You deserve," "Happiness," or "I forgive you." He never sent those messages. Maybe he would someday. Maybe he wouldn't. Forgiveness was complicated, and he wasn't ready yet. One afternoon in March, exactly 1 year after the divorce had been finalized, exactly 2 years since Randall had walked into his house and found his life in ruins, David called him. You remember the restitution Jesse Morrison owes? The $850,000 to multiple victims? Yeah, I remember. He can't pay it. He lost everything. His law license, his house, his savings. He's working as a paralegal at some strip mall law office making $19 an hour. The victims are getting pennies on the dollar. That's unfortunate. It is, but here's the thing. You're one of the victims entitled to restitution. And because you cooperated with the prosecution, because you provided evidence, because you testified, you're first in line. The court just awarded you $127,000 from the liquidation of Jesse's assets. Randall was quiet for a moment. $127,000? From what? He had to sell his BMW, his Rolex collection, some investment properties he owned through LLCs. After the other victims got their shares, there was $127,000 left. It's yours. Randall thought about it. Thought about Jesse Morrison, disgraced and working for minimum wage. Thought about the empire he'd built by defrauding vulnerable people and how it had all come crashing down. There was justice in that. Poetic justice. Put it in a trust, Randall said, for victims of attorney fraud, people who can't afford to fight back when their lawyers screw them over. Let them use it for legal fees, expert witnesses, whatever they need. Randall, that's a lot of money to give away. I don't need it. I've got my business, my house, my savings. And maybe the next person who gets screwed by someone like Jesse Morrison will have a fighting chance because of this. You're a good man, Randall O'Neill. I'm trying to be. 2 years after returning home from Dubai, Randall was having dinner with David at a restaurant downtown. They'd become friends over the course of the legal battle. Real friends, not just attorney and client. They met for dinner once a month, talked about life, business, everything. You ever regret how it all went down? David asked over dessert. Going after Jesse so hard? Destroying his career? Randall thought about it. Thought about Jesse Morrison sitting in county jail, then emerging 16 months later to work as a paralegal. Thought about the hundreds of thousands of dollars in restitution, the lives he'd ruined, the families he'd torn apart. No, Randall said. He was running a scam, ruining lives. Someone had to stop him. You did more than stop him. You destroyed him. I exposed him, Randall corrected. He destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone could see what he really was. David nodded slowly. Fair enough. And Annie, you ever think about reconciliation? No, Randall said. But even as he said it, he wasn't entirely sure it was true. Annie had made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but she'd also been lonely, vulnerable, targeted by a predator who knew exactly how to exploit her weaknesses. Did that excuse what she'd done? No, but it explained it. An explanation wasn't the same as justification, but it was something. I think, Randall said carefully, that what Annie and I had is over. It ended before I even came home. Maybe it ended when I got on that plane to Dubai 10 years ago. Maybe it ended when I chose my career over our marriage for the 10th time. But that doesn't mean I hate her. It just means we're done. That's mature of you. Maturity is just another word for being too tired to hold grudges. They both laughed at that. As they paid their bill and walked out into the California evening, Randall felt something he hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not happiness exactly. He wasn't sure he'd ever be truly happy again. Not in the way he'd been happy before Annie's betrayal. But contentment was something. It was peace. It was waking up in the morning and not dreading the day ahead. It was enough. 3 years to the day after he'd come home from Dubai, Randall got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a check for $6,000, the final payment from Annie, bringing her total repayment to $5,102, more than the original $40,200 she'd taken. And a letter written on simple notebook paper. Randall, this is the last payment. I've paid back everything I owe you, plus extra for the pain I caused. I know money doesn't fix what I did, but I wanted you to know I kept my word. Every single month, even when it was hard, I made the payment. I'm getting remarried. His name is Tom Reeves. He's a history teacher at my school. We've been dating for a year and took our time getting to know each other. We're both in therapy, together and separately, because I refuse to make the same mistakes twice. He's kind and patient and nothing like Jesse. He knows everything about what I did, and he's chosen to love me anyway. I don't deserve him, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve him. I wanted you to hear it from me first, not from some random email or Facebook post. I don't expect you to be happy for me. I don't expect forgiveness or friendship or anything from you. But I wanted you to know that the therapy helped. The work I did on myself helped. And in some strange way, what you did, exposing Jesse, holding me accountable, refusing to let me get away with fraud, that helped too. You could have just let me keep the money and walked away. You could have gotten your revenge and left me destroyed. But you didn't. You held me accountable, yes, but you also showed me mercy. You let me make restitution. You let me rebuild. You gave me the chance to become someone better. I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. I hope you're happy, Randall. I hope you found whatever it is you were looking for when you went to Dubai all those years ago. And I hope someday you can think of me without anger. With genuine gratitude, Annie Randall read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in a drawer with all the other documents from that chapter of his life. The divorce papers, the settlement agreement, the news articles about Jesse's sentencing, the check from Annie's final payment. He sat down and wrote a response. The first one he'd written in 3 years. Annie, congratulations on your engagement. I mean that sincerely. You deserve happiness, and I hope Tom gives you everything I couldn't. I'm doing well. The business is thriving. The house feels like home again. I've made peace with how things turned out. We weren't meant to make it, you and I. We wanted different things, and I was too blind to see it until it was too late. That's on both of us. I forgive you. I should have said that sooner, but I wasn't ready. Now I am. You made mistakes, but so did I. Mine were just less dramatic. You taught me that presence matters more than provision, that love requires more than good intentions and wire transfers. I needed to learn that lesson, even though it hurt. I hope your marriage to Tom is everything ours should have been. Be happy. Randall. He sent the email before he could second-guess himself. Annie responded 10 minutes later with a single word, "Thank you." That night, Randall went out to dinner. Not alone this time. He'd been seeing someone, Jasmine, the pediatric nurse he'd met at a restaurant bar 2 years ago. They'd taken it slow, very slow. Coffee dates for the first 2 months, then dinner dates, then eventually weekend trips and meeting each other's friends. She knew his whole story. He'd told her everything on their 5th date. Figured she deserved to know what kind of baggage she was signing up for. She'd listened without judgment and then said, "We've all got baggage. The question is whether you've learned from it." He thought he had. He made time for her. He was present, engaged, attentive. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He didn't let work consume him. He showed up. And tonight, sitting across from her at a nice restaurant, holding her hand across the table, Randall realized something. He was happy, not content, not at peace. Actually, genuinely happy. "What are you smiling about?" Jasmine asked. "Just thinking about how things turned out." "Good thoughts?" "Yeah, good thoughts." Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the consequences of their own actions while you move forward with your life. Sometimes justice means holding people accountable without destroying them. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go of anger, even when the hurt remains. Randall had learned all of that the hard way. He'd learned that you can't spend 10 years building a future with someone who isn't there. That presence matters more than provision. That love requires more than money and good intentions. It requires time, attention, showing up for the hard moments. He'd also learned that betrayal doesn't have to break you, that you can survive the worst day of your life and come out stronger, that happiness is possible even after everything falls apart. Would he do things differently if he could go back? Yes. He would have come home more often. He would have checked his email more carefully. He would have realized that a marriage can't survive on video calls and wire transfers. He would have chosen Annie over his career, at least sometimes. But he couldn't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward with the wisdom we've gained from our mistakes. Randall O'Neill had lost his wife, lost 2 years to legal battles, lost the future he'd imagined for himself. But he'd gained something too. self-respect, a successful business, real love with someone who valued him, and the knowledge that he could survive betrayal and come out whole on the other side. That was worth more than any house, more than any marriage built on absence and resentment, more than any amount of money sitting in a Dubai bank account. It was worth everything. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought and what you learned. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.